All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane, and this is Let's Talk Native. If you haven't caught the first hour, I've got a room full of angry guys. Man, I've never seen so much such anger in this room. No, I'm just kidding. We growl and we bark, but we don't bite. I've got Matt Hill in studio. I've got Paul Delarone. I've got Ed Schindler and Ross John joining me again in studio. We've obviously been talking about the aggression by the federal government, not just in any one particular territory, but many of them. And back in February, we've had federal raids that took place. Almost 100 agents went into Tonawanda. Just a little over a week ago, we had a raid on one of the businesses on the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. And of course, let's not minimize the fact that we've got IRS agents that have met with the Tonawanda Chiefs Council. They met with the Onondaga Chiefs Council, really trying to assert their will on income tax associated with even with the so-called traditional councils. We also have a law that was passed back in 2009 that only this year has been aggressively pushed on our territory, which is and the law, it seems benign enough. It's called CHIPRA, and it has to do with producing or creating more health insurance for children. The problem is where they funded this thing was out of federal excise tax on tobacco products, and even that wouldn't be so bad. I mean, the fact that the product comes to our territory for the most part, most of the product in our territory has federal excise tax on the product before it even gets to our territory. That's something we just pass on to the consumer. But what was interesting about this tax was they created a floor tax provision in it, and the floor tax basically said that if product was held, paid for at the lower tax rate prior to April 1st, 2009, and if it was held for sale after April 1st, 2009, that the tax had to be assessed. They had to make up the difference. So $6.16, as far as cigarettes goes, was going to have to be assessed on every carton of cigarettes that sat on a shelf. And when we first heard this idea, we thought, well, that can't possibly apply to our territories. I mean, we've never had a product bought and paid for in our possession on our territories, and then had the federal government come afterwards and say, all right, now you need to pay us some more. And for one thing, we don't pay federal excise tax. The manufacturers, those who clear product, they pay federal excise tax. We just buy product that comes to our territory, and so this was something that we didn't think was even possible. Lo and behold, almost 3 years later, a bunch of people start getting letters from an agency called TTB. It's Alcohol and Tobacco Trade and Tax Bureau. So this is almost like a new agency. So it's not just ATF anymore or the Treasury Department. Now you have this TTB office out of Cincinnati, Ohio. So this woman sends out all these letters to people, assessing them for 50, 60, 100, 200, 300,000. And in fact, I even heard a few people got assessed for over $1 million on product. They said, and of course, they just say that you owe this, and they don't even tell you what they're basing this on. And they're saying, look, if you think we assess you too much, then you bring every bit of your records into our office, and we'll let you do a plea deal. We'll let you bargain it down, plead to a lesser charge. We'll let you only pay we'll knock you from $100,000 down to $50,000. But the fact of the matter is, our people are opposed to this thing. And I even went after a couple of the politicians here, Kirsten Gillibrand and Brian Higgins, and they even said, and these guys endorsed this thing, and they said, look, we didn't intend for this to happen. It's an unintended consequence of something we thought was a good law, and so that's the position they took. But again, and I bring this up because this is something that a lot of, and not just Seneca, this is Tuscarora, Tonawanda, Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, everybody's facing this thing. This is another law that doesn't mention us in it, but when this law gets handed down to their enforcement agents, it turns into, we're going after the Indians. And even the Steve Dickey who comes in to raid the business in Cattaraugus, even he was perfectly willing and wanted to engage us in conversation about floor tax. And it just kind of shows you the aggressive nature that they have.
Look, there's you can't just start with that and not finish the rest of the story. Is that when we went to Higgins and Gillibrand, and I was at least part of one of those meetings with you, and they did tell us that it was an unintended consequence, that they didn't really intend for, Native communities to be a part of that, part of that legislation. And from there, we tried to get an audience through the White House.
Yeah, there's in the White House, Barack Obama has in his White House a position called the Senior Policy Advisor on Native American Affairs to the White House, and it was Kimberly Teehee who was in that position. And what we did is we got a commitment out of Gillibrand's office and out of Higgins' office to facilitate a meeting with this person. And the whole point was we wanted to ask the same question of a White House person that we asked of Gillibrand and Higgins.
Why? Because we realized that the people are, our elected officials at the time, whether it's president or councils or a mix of both, and their attorneys were talking to agency people.
The same thing we're talking about in the first hour. They were talking to the lowly guys in this thing, the ones who had no authority even to change any policy.
Right.
And of course all they got was the standard line. They said, oh no, this tax is in fact they were told this tax is almost like personal income tax.
Right.
They even questioned whether Porter might be violating law by even trying to engage them in a conversation. And he stuck his tail between his legs, and he wrote letters back to the business people saying, I'm sorry, the TTB agents told us you're on your own with this thing. It may be against the law for me to even participate in this conversation. That's what came from the president of Seneca Nation.
But there was something even more than that, and we found this out just recently.
Well, and that's exactly right. When we went through this process, one of the things that got asked of me was to draft a formal request and send it to Higgins' office and Gillibrand's office for the meeting with Kim Teehee, this is the senior policy advisor. And so I did so. And I drafted the letter, sent it in. And then I didn't hear anything right away. And by now, I've got a commitment. Keep in mind, I've got a commitment from both of the senator and the congressman that they will facilitate this meeting.
At least 8 counselors.
Well, I'm not even there yet.
Right.
I mean, at this point, I had 4 counselors who wanted to attend the meeting. So in my formal request, I said, look, I've got some business people that want to be there. I've got 4 Seneca Nation counselors that want to be there. I've got some folks from Tonawanda who want to be there. And I laid it all clearly out who would be attending such a meeting if they could accommodate such that many people. So that's what and these guys had committed. They committed not only to facilitate this meeting, but they were going to draft a letter. Each one was going to draft a letter from the senator's position and from the congressman's position on how they felt that this law had this unintended consequence. I didn't get the letter. But what I did was I got an email back, and this email came from Gillibrand's office, not from Higgins' office, but they were kind of all working together. I get this letter back from Gillibrand's office, and it said, we're having some trouble, going through this process. We're concerned about protocol, and we're concerned about whether the Seneca Nation should have been more engaged in this conversation. And at this point, we don't think we can move forward with facilitating this meeting without a discussion with Seneca Nation counselors or the president. And I kind of wrote, a venomous reply back, but at the time when I wrote my reply, I knew that I had 8 Seneca Nation counselors who were willing to sign on to the initiative that I started and to ask not only for this meeting to take place, but they flat out said, if you need to meet with us, let us know and we'll come there and meet with you. So I sent, I hand delivered the letter that's signed by 8 counselors to that effect. I hand delivered it to Kirsten Gillibrand's office, and I hand delivered a copy of it to Brian Higgins' office. What I got back, and this is we're talking May 1st now. I get a letter back from Higgins' office that says, let me back up again. So I didn't hear anything for a while, and then it came to my attention that Kim Teehee had left the post. Now I'm really kind of miffed. At this point, I'm thinking, considering this is the election year, there's a good chance that they're not even going to fill that position. So now I'm really hacked off. So I sent nasty letters again, and I said, well, you guys dragged your feet just long enough. Now Kim Teehee has left the post with no indication that they're going to replace her. Well, a few days later, they replaced her. So I kind of wrote a letter apologizing for going off on them and said,
I didn't see that one.
I don't like to broadcast the apologies. I only like to broadcast the ones that I'm yelling at somebody. So I sent a letter and say, look, they have replaced her. There still is an opportunity. That's when I get a letter back from Higgins' office, and they said, all right, we've got a cover letter drafted, and we'll change the address to your request and send it to Jody Gillette, who was the replacement.